My hands were surprisingly steady as I held the steering wheel, my car idling just outside the grand wrought iron gates of the estate. A valet in a crisp black vest hurried over, but I just sat there for a moment, breathing, in and out. I could feel the familiar ghost of anxiety coiling in my stomach, the memory of old shame. It was a feeling I hadn't had in years. I stepped out of the car, the warm evening air wrapping around me. The venue was exactly what I'd expected from Ryan. Extravagant, loud, and designed to make a statement. A long stone path was lined with fairy lights that twinkled like fallen stars, leading to a sprawling mansion that looked like it was pulled from a movie set. I smoothed down my simple black dress. It wasn't flashy, but it was designer, a quiet armor of success that no one here would recognize. Before we dive into this, please like this video, subscribe to my channel, and tell me in the comments where are you watching from. Walking into the reception hall was like walking back in time. The faces were the same, just a little older, a little more settled. Ryan's family, his friends, the very people who had watched me shrink under his casual cruelty. I felt their eyes on me immediately, a flicker of recognition, then a dismissive glance. The whispers started almost at once, a low hiss that followed me as I moved toward the seating chart. Is that Lena? What is she doing here? I didn't think she'd have the nerve to show up. Then, the one that cut the deepest, from one of his cousins who always looked at me with a mixture of pity and disdain. Isn't that the one who used to borrow money for gas? I heard she once cried because her car broke down and she couldn't afford the tow. A small, sharp laugh followed, like the crack of a whip. My face remained a calm mask. I found my name on a card, assigned to a table in the back, far from the head table, of course. A polite dismissal. I was an afterthought, a curiosity he'd invited for his own amusement. I could feel him watching me from across the room. I met his gaze. Ryan was standing with his groomsmen, a glass of champagne in his hand. He looked handsome, successful. When he saw me looking, he raised his glass in a mock toast, a smug little smile playing on his lips. It was the same smile he'd given me 100 times before, the one that said, "Look at me. Look at what you lost. Look at how little you are." But something was different this time. This time, I knew a secret he didn't. The spotlight would find me soon enough, and his smile. It was about to shatter. Years ago, my life was a collection of worn-out things. My apartment was small, with a faucet that dripped and a heater that rattled in the winter. My clothes were mostly from thrift stores, chosen for durability, not style. My car was a decade-old sedan that coughed and sputtered every morning, a constant source of low-grade panic. I was a waitress, living on tips and a prayer. Paycheck to paycheck wasn't a phase. It was a permanent state of being. Ryan came into my life like a storm. He was charming, ambitious, and from a family with money. At first, it felt like a fairy tale. He took me to fancy restaurants where I was terrified to look at the prices on the menu. He bought me gifts I felt guilty accepting, but the fairy tale quickly revealed its dark side. He didn't see me, he saw a project, a girl he could mold, and when he was in the right mood, save. His help was never kind. It was always a transaction, and the price was my dignity. I remember one time standing in the grocery store aisle, my cart half full. I was at the checkout, the total climbing higher and higher on the small screen. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew, with a sickening certainty, that I didn't have enough. My card would be declined. Ryan was waiting by the door, tapping his foot impatiently. "Is there a problem?" the cashier asked, her voice flat. My face burned with shame. "I'm sorry," I mumbled, avoiding her eyes. I have to put some things back." I started pulling items off the conveyor belt. The small bag of almonds, the block of cheese, the chicken breasts, things that felt like luxuries. Ryan strode over, his face a mask of annoyance. "What's going on, Lena?" he asked, his voice loud enough for the people in line behind us to hear. "We're going to be late." I miscalculated," I whispered, my voice barely audible. He let out an exasperated sigh and pulled out his wallet. He slapped his credit card on the counter. "Just pay for it. God, it's embarrassing." He didn't look at me. The cashier took his card, and the shame I felt was so thick I could barely breathe. In the car, he didn't speak to me. He just drove, his jaw tight. The silence was worse than any lecture. It screamed that I was a burden, a charity case. He loved to remind me of my place. "You're lucky I put up with you, Lena," he'd say, sometimes as a joke, sometimes with a sharp edge. "Someone like you should be grateful." His family was no better. Dinners at his parents' house were a quiet torture. His mother would ask me about my job at the diner with a polite, condescending smile. "It must be so tiring," she'd say. "Do you plan on doing that forever?" They saw me as a temporary amusement for their son, a girl from the wrong side of the tracks who he would eventually get tired of, and they were right. The end was a public execution of my self-esteem. He took me to a dinner party at a sleek, modern restaurant downtown. It was one of his friends' birthdays. The table was full of people like him, people who had never worried about a grocery bill, whose cars started every single time. I felt like an alien, trying to mimic their easy laughter and confident conversation. I mostly stayed quiet, nursing a glass of water, trying not to do or say anything that would draw attention to how out of place I was. But Ryan made sure I was the center of attention. He was telling a story about a recent trip he'd taken, and everyone was hanging on his every word. Then he paused, a glint in his eye, and turned to me. "You know," he said, his voice booming across the table, "it's funny. My life is all about ambition, about climbing higher. And then there's Lena." He gestured toward me with his wine glass. "Dating her is like, well, it's like adopting a charity case. You're always having to bail her out of something." The table erupted in laughter. It wasn't just a chuckle, it was a full-throated tearing sound. One of his friends slapped him on the back. "Good one, man!" I just sat there, frozen. The sound of their laughter echoed in my ears, drowning out everything else. My face was on fire, but my hands were ice cold. I wanted to stand up and scream. I wanted to throw my water in his face. I wanted to run, but I did nothing. I just sat there and took it, a polite, shattered smile plastered on my face. The rest of the dinner was a blur. I don't remember what we ate. I don't remember the drive home. All I remember is the silence in the car, a silence that was heavier and more suffocating than any words. He broke up with me a week later. It was a phone call. I was just getting home from a double shift, my feet aching, the smell of grease still clinging to my hair. "Lena," he said, his voice distant and cool, "this isn't working." I knew it was coming, but it still felt like a punch to the gut. "Why?" I asked, my voice small. "I need to focus on my career, on my future. I can't be weighed down," he said. The unspoken words hung in the air between us, weighed down by you. "You're holding me back, Lena. I need someone who's on my level." And just like that, it was over. I was discarded, not just broken up with, but deemed unworthy, a liability. The heartbreak was a physical ache, a constant weight in my chest. But the humiliation was worse. It followed me everywhere. I felt his words branded on my skin, charity case. To survive, I threw myself into work. I picked up a second job, stocking shelves at a grocery store from midnight until dawn. My life became a cycle of exhaustion. I'd finish my shift at the diner, drive to the grocery store, work until the sun came up, and then go home to my cold, empty apartment for a few hours of restless sleep before starting all over again. My family was supposed to be my safe harbor, but they were just another storm. They saw my exhaustion, my sadness, and they interpreted it as failure. They had been impressed by Ryan, by his money, and his family name. In their eyes, I had fumbled a golden opportunity. I remember one Sunday dinner at my parents' house. I was so tired I could barely keep my eyes open. My aunt sat across from me, studying my face with a look of pity. "You look so tired, dear," she said, her voice dripping with concern. "Maybe that Ryan wasn't so wrong. You know, a man like that needs a woman who can keep up. Maybe you need to be more realistic about your prospects." I looked at my mother, hoping for a defense, for some sign of support. She just stirred her mashed potatoes, her eyes fixed on her plate. My father cleared his throat and changed the subject. In their silence, I heard their agreement. They believed it too. Maybe I wasn't good enough. The thought was a bitter pill. I finished my dinner in silence, swallowing down my food along with my shame and my anger. That night, sitting alone in my apartment, the silence was deafening. It was in that crushing loneliness that a tiny, hard seed of resolve was planted. I didn't cry. I just made a promise to the tired, defeated girl staring back at me from the cheap mirror on the wall. One day, I whispered, they will all regret this. One day you will be more than they could ever imagine. That promise became my religion. It was the first thing I thought of when my alarm blared at 4 a.m., and the last thing I thought of when I collapsed into bed. I started small. In the few precious hours between my jobs, I lived on my laptop. I consumed everything I could about e-commerce and digital marketing. I watched countless tutorials, read articles, and took free online courses. The idea for my business was born from my own frustration. I loved skincare, but I could never afford the high-end products that promised amazing results. I started researching natural, affordable ingredients, mixing small batches in my own kitchen. I built my own website, a clunky, amateurish thing at first. I took photos of my products with my old phone, arranging them on a white sheet on my living room floor. I poured every spare dollar I had, money that should have gone to fixing my car or buying new shoes, into buying ingredients and cheap packaging. The first few months were brutal. I made 0 sales. The doubt was a constant, nagging voice in my head. You're wasting your time. You're going to fail. Ryan was right, but then, one night, as I was stocking cans of soup at the grocery store, my phone buzzed. It was a notification I had set up. An email with the subject line, "You've made a sale!" My heart leaped. It was for a single jar of face cream. $12. I almost cried right there in the canned goods aisle. That one sale was all the proof I needed. It was possible. I packaged that first order with the care of a jeweler handling a diamond. I wrote a thank you note by hand. That $12 went right back into the business. Slowly, one sale became 2. 2 became 10. I used the little money I made to run small, targeted social media ads. I sent samples to small-time bloggers, hoping for a review. Most ignored me, but a few didn't, and their followers started buying. The nights turned into years. My life was a relentless grind. I gave up friends, sleep, and any semblance of a social life. My tiny apartment became a warehouse with boxes of ingredients and shipping supplies stacked in every corner. There were so many moments I wanted to quit. A bad batch of product that had to be thrown out, costing me hundreds of dollars I didn't have. A nasty review from a customer that sent me into a spiral of self-doubt. But every time I felt like giving up, I would picture Ryan's smug face at that dinner party. I would hear the sound of his friends' laughter, and the fire in my belly would roar back to life. Then came the breakthrough. A well-known beauty influencer stumbled upon my website. She bought a few products with her own money, tried them, and loved them. She posted a video about my brand, raving about the quality and the affordable price. She called it a hidden gem. I woke up the next morning to hundreds of sale notifications. My website had crashed from the traffic. It was terrifying and exhilarating. That one video changed everything. Orders poured in faster than I could fill them. I had to quit my jobs. I rented a small workshop space. I hired my first employee, a young woman named Sarah who was as passionate as I was. We worked 18-hour days, fueled by cheap coffee, and the thrill of what we were building. My company, Aura Skincare, exploded. We were featured in magazines. Investors started calling. I was hesitant at first, scared of losing control of the thing I had built from nothing. But I found the right partners, people who believed in my vision. We expanded our product line, moved into a real office, and hired a full team. By the time I was 30, the girl who used to count pennies for gas was the CEO of a multi-million-dollar empire. I bought a beautiful condo downtown with a view of the city. I drove a car that started with the push of a button. But I kept my success quiet. I didn't flaunt it on social media. I didn't call my aunt to tell her how realistic my prospects had become. The validation I needed wasn't from them, it was from myself. My peace was more valuable than their approval. Then, the invitation came. It was sitting on the polished marble countertop of my kitchen, looking completely out of place among my morning mail. Cream-colored cardstock, elegant gold font. Ryan and Jessica request the pleasure of your company at their wedding. I stared at it, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. After all these years, after complete silence, this. Tucked inside was a small personal note, his familiar, arrogant handwriting scrawled at the bottom. "Don't worry about a gift, Lena. Just showing up will be surprise enough." The condescension was breathtaking. He didn't want me there to celebrate with him. He wanted a ghost from his past to be a witness to his glorious present. He wanted the broke girl he'd thrown away to see how high he had climbed, to see the beautiful, wealthy woman he was marrying. He wanted me to stand in the corner and feel small. He was offering me a front row seat to my own inadequacy. My first instinct was to throw it in the trash. But then I looked around my beautiful, quiet home, a space I had earned through my own sweat and tears. I thought of the girl who cried over a tow truck and the woman who now signed checks that could buy the whole towing company. And I decided I would go. Not for him, but for her. It was time to finally close that chapter. I walked through the reception hall, a sea of pastel dresses and dark suits. I chose the elegant, simple black dress for a reason. It didn't scream for attention, it commanded it. When Ryan finally saw me, his smirk was wide and practiced. He excused himself from his friends and walked over, his bride, Jessica, on his arm. She was beautiful, polished, and looked at me with a polite, vacant curiosity. "Lena," he said, his voice dripping with false warmth, "I can't believe you actually came. You clean up nice." "You invited me," I said simply, my voice even. Of course, I wanted you to see all this," he said, gesturing around the opulent room. "No hard feelings, right?" "None at all," I replied, meeting his gaze. There was nothing behind his eyes but a shallow, self-satisfied gleam. He was still the same boy I had known, just in a more expensive suit. I took my seat at the designated table in the back, next to some distant cousins of the bride. The dinner was served, the music played, and the toasts began. I watched from a distance as people praised Ryan's ambition and his success. He soaked it all in, looking like a king on his throne. Then his father, a prominent real estate developer, stood up to give his speech. He was a proud, booming man who loved the sound of his own voice. He talked about his son, about family, and then he transitioned to his business. "As many of you know," he said, his voice echoing through the microphone, "we're about to break ground on our most ambitious project yet, the Harrison Towers. It's a project that will change the city's skyline." He paused for dramatic effect. "And it's a project that would not be possible without the confidence and significant financial backing of one of our key investors. She's a visionary, a brilliant young woman who has built an incredible company from the ground up." I felt a subtle shift in the room. People were listening intently. "She's with us tonight," his father continued, scanning the crowd. "And I'd like to personally thank the CEO of Aura Skincare, Ms. Lena Carter." He raised his glass in my direction. A spotlight, as if on cue, swung from the head table and landed directly on me. 100 faces turned in unison, a wave of shock and confusion rippling through the room. For a moment, there was complete silence. Then, a smattering of applause started, growing louder as people connected the dots. I looked over at the head table. Ryan's face was completely white, his champagne glass frozen halfway to his lips. His jaw was slack, his eyes wide with a disbelief so profound it was almost comical. He stared at me, then at his father, then back at me, as if he couldn't process what was happening. Jessica's perfect smile was gone, replaced by a tight, strained line. She was looking at Ryan, her eyes narrowed with a million unasked questions. The atmosphere in the room had been completely transformed. The narrative Ryan had so carefully crafted for the evening, his success, his perfect life, had just been hijacked. Suddenly, I wasn't the broke ex-girlfriend. I was the power player, the silent benefactor behind the family's biggest triumph. The moment the speech ended, it was like a dam had broken. People didn't swarm Ryan and his new bride, they started moving toward my table. The same friends of his who had laughed at the charity case comment all those years ago were now pushing their way through the crowd to shake my hand. "Lena, incredible," one of them gushed, pressing a business card into my palm. "I had no idea. We should talk. My firm is always looking to partner with innovative companies like yours." Ryan's mother, the woman who had looked down on my waitress job, hurried over, her face stretched into a sycophantic smile. "Lena, dear," she cooed, "we must catch up properly. We had no idea you were so accomplished." I was polite, distant. I accepted their congratulations with a quiet nod, a small, controlled smile. Through the crowd, I saw Ryan making his way towards me, his face a confused mess of anger and desperation. He pulled me aside, his grip on my arm a little too tight. "What is this, Lena?" he hissed, his voice low. "What kind of game are you playing?" I looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't feel a shred of the old pain or intimidation. I just felt a strange, detached kind of pity. "There's no game, Ryan," I said, my voice calm. "It's just my life." "My father's project? You're the investor?" he stammered. "Why didn't you say anything?" "You never asked," I said simply, pulling my arm free from his grasp. "You just assumed I was the same person you threw away." His face crumpled. In that moment, he wasn't the confident, successful man he pretended to be. He was just a small, insecure boy, exposed in front of everyone he wanted to impress. He was standing in the middle of his perfect wedding, and he had been made irrelevant. The poetic justice was so sharp, so complete, it was almost painful to watch. His bride was watching us, her eyes like chips of ice. His victory lap had turned into a public humiliation. I didn't need to say another word. I gave him a final, polite nod and turned away. My silence, my success, my simple presence, it was a louder rebuke than any angry words could ever be. I walked toward the exit, the whispers following me again, but this time they were different. They were whispers of awe, of shock, of respect. As I stepped out into the cool night air, I felt a profound sense of lightness. The ghost that had haunted me for years had finally been laid to rest. I didn't feel triumphant or vengeful. I just felt free. The revenge wasn't in seeing him fall. It was in the quiet, undeniable truth that I had risen on my own. I had survived him. I had survived my family's doubts. And I had built a life that was entirely my own, on my own terms. I got in my car, the engine humming to life with a quiet, reliable power, and I drove away, not looking back. If you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever been mocked for being small, let this story remind you. One day, your silence might speak louder than their cruelty. Your value is not determined by their opinion. It is forged in your own fire, in your own hard work, in the quiet moments when you refuse to give up on yourself. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story matters.